So for me, everything has to make sense scientifically, right? But there was also an open-minded side to me, where I'm like, you know what? I know I don't understand everything. Let me see what's out there. And when these two aspects of me, technology, let's say the science, analytical side combined with the open-mindedness, that's when everything started to make sense and come together with spirituality and, of course, this journey I mentioned to you.
Welcome to Personal Development Mastery Podcast, episode 364. I'm your host, Agi Keramidas, and my mission is to inspire you to take the actions you need to improve your life. In this podcast, I invite myself into the minds of remarkable people and I distill their wisdom to equip you with the simple, consistent actions you need to master yourself and create a life of purpose and fulfillment. If you want to learn how to integrate technology and spirituality for enhanced well-being, and also how to embrace cultural diversity for your personal growth, then the following conversation with my guest Constantin Morun is for you. Let's dive right in. Today I am delighted to be speaking with Constantin Morun. Constantin, you are a holistic life empowerment mentor and coach with over 15 years of experience in personal growth, spirituality, and professional development. You are also a senior account technology strategist at Microsoft, passionate about integrating technology, spirituality, and mentorship. And you are the host of the Unleash Thyself podcast, which inspires people to unlock their full potential. Constantin, welcome to the show. It's such a pleasure it's always a pleasure to speak with fellow podcasters, but with you, it's double the pleasure.
Agi, thank you so much for the beautiful introduction, and thank you for having me here, and thank you to the audience for tuning in. It's a pleasure.
I'm very much looking forward to the conversation, and there are elements. One of them I mentioned briefly, the technology, spirituality, how they converge, and we'll discuss all those fascinating things. Let's begin a bit with sharing your journey. I know that you were born and raised in Romania, and when you were 17, you moved to Canada. So I would like to ask you, really, because there are these transformational moments in one's life, and I bet your transition from one country to another, different cultures, so that was a major one of them. So that's one of the two that I want to talk to you about. Let's start with with this one and how it it affected you. What was the effect of that in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that question, Agi. And you know what? When I was younger, I didn't realize it would be such a transformational change for me. I mean, we left everything behind, right? Relatives, friends, everything. So I was very, let's call it, unhappy to having to move to Canada, a place that's so far away from what I used to call home, and of course start fresh. And I was 17, so that meant I left my back then high school sweetheart back in Romania, friends, everything, right? And of course my parents did too, and so did my brother. But it wasn't about them back then, it was about me, and I felt hurt, and I felt like, oh, you know what, I have to move to this new place. Why do I have to move and leave everything behind? And I didn't realize the positive impact it will have on my life until much later in life, when, of course, the culture, like you said, was very different, more of a growth mindset culture versus a fixed mindset. I can explain it if you'd like, but essentially the idea that I could make mistakes and learn from them and not necessarily be punished for making mistakes or having to hide them. So that was a big, big lesson that I learned over the years I was, let's say, in high school and then university. So that's kind of, I would say, the biggest transition. The other big lessons for me in the moment that allowed me to be who I am today is the diversity of the cultures I got to meet here, because Canada is very welcoming, right? There are people from every continent, every place in the world. And, growing up in Romania, you don't see many different cultures. And that means you have a certain viewpoint of the world, you have a certain viewpoint of people that look different and act different than you. But once you get immersed in a culture that has a lot more diversity, and it's more inclusive, all of a sudden you realize we're all just the same. We're human beings trying to have a life that we don't regret, right? Trying to enjoy and have a fulfilled life. And then once I realized that, it opened up my doors to so many opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Listening to you share that makes me realize how many commonalities I realized with my own story, who I left on my own Greece to move to the UK. I liked very much what you said about the diversity of the cultures, and I also can feel the same thing of feeling welcomed. I have always felt welcomed in England, and it's of course, to a large extent, that has to do with our own mindset. It's not only about the others, but that's a big topic.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I was going to say, of course, you moved as well, right, to a completely new culture. So you must have your own beautiful story there. But what you say here is very, very important. So it has to do with your own mindset more than the others. And I would argue with you, it has everything to do with your own mindset. Because for the longest time in my life, I tried to change others without looking at me as being the only person I can control and change. And that didn't go very well. And most people listening to this will be able to attest that whenever you try to change something that you have no control over, it usually work the way you are expecting it to work.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And the more you realize that everything that you perceive that are outside, or your life outside, the more you realize that this is all happening because of your mindset, of your mind, of your perception, it really starts to change how you see life.
Yes.
You see life for what it is, and it's a beautiful journey, and it's great to be sharing it and discussing it, and because I think it is one of the important things that come out of conversations like this. I want to move a little bit further ahead in your story, and there is one other moment. I'm not sure if it was a moment or a period, but that was the spiritual awakening part.
Yes.
Because I think that is very, very even more probably important, because when one has this kind of experience, I will put it like that, it's very difficult, if not impossible, not to make changes in life and feel deeply connected and so on. So please share your experience about that. I'm fascinated to find out how it was for you.
Absolutely, I agree. Love the question as well. So it's important to note I was born in Eastern Europe, right? And the religion there, or the religion around where I was born, was Christian Orthodox. Mm-hmm. And that's what we grew up as, Christian Orthodox. We went to church every now and then. It wasn't an overly religious culture or upbringing for me. However, I never really related to that, so I would never call myself religious back then. And I would say in my 20s, I was more agnostic than anything else. Now, my first interaction with spirituality really happened around my mid to late 20s, when I met this alternative healer as part of something that my mother had found to help my brother and my ex-wife at the time with their mental health. And there were some things that she was telling me about me, talking about the universe, that made sense to me, but also were challenging my own beliefs. And that got me thinking a lot. I was still very young, and I didn't have the network around me to do anything with it. But that, I would say, was the catalyst to starting me on this path of understanding what spirituality means for me and how I can bring more of that into my life. Not necessarily tied to any one religion, but more to the idea that we're all part of this big universe. We're all part of nature. We're all connected to each other, be it if it's a tree or an animal or a person, right? And how does it actually fit into the bigger life agenda, the bigger life purpose that I believe each of us come to this planet with a purpose. It doesn't mean that it's, this grand thing that all of us have to be doing. Some people come here just to enjoy life and spend time in the forest. Others come here for a very clear mission. And I strongly believe that that's kind of what allowed me to be what I am today. Because had it not been for my spiritual awakening, which really, I would say, the biggest aspect of it happened in 2022, at the beginning of it, when I went to Ecuador. And I went to a mental health retreat. I went to the jungle, essentially, in the Andes Mountains. And while I was there for 2 weeks, I also had the chance to sit with plant medicine, like traditional plant medicine from the Amazonian jungle, ayahuasca, if you're familiar with, and St. Pedro, which is a second medicine. And that essentially opened up my mind. And you see, I mean, I have a mathematics and engineering background. That's what I studied. So for me, everything has to make sense scientifically, right? But there was also an open-minded side to me where I'm like, you know what? I know I don't understand everything. Let me see what's out there. Mm-hmm. And when these two aspects of me, technology, let's say the science, analytical side combined with the open-mindedness, that's when everything started to make sense and come together with spirituality. And of course, this journey I mentioned to you in with the plant medicine. That's really what took, let's say, my spiritual transformation that was going along nicely and then exponentially took it to the next level.
And that's thank you for sharing that. That's great. And there was, well, many things, but what you said about the scientific part of you that wants to, rationalize and provide evidence for or explanation for something. However, on the other hand, with a psychedelic experience like the one that you describe, or an awakening experience, or generally a deep spiritual experience, there is this kind of knowing that goes way beyond the rational mind. It is the whole you that knows it, and even if the mind will start projecting arguments against it, you can't really, maybe you can, but you shouldn't ignore that knowing that you have but I completely relate to the two sides that they need to explain with logic, because I'm a very logical and analytical person, but I'm also very spiritual. So it is always a great blend of these two seemingly, different sides.
Absolutely. Agree with you 100%, Agi. I love that you said that because, and I would argue that a lot of it has to do with how we are raised and what mentors and society we have around us when we are raised, right? So I was raised in an environment where both of my parents are engineers, in an environment where schooling and sciences were very important. And I'm not taking anything away from it, right? It brought me to where I am today, and I'm very grateful for that. But then there are other people that grow in environments where maybe spirituality, and of course religion is part of it, or a bigger piece of it. So those people have an easier time with understanding that there is something bigger out there. There is something they don't understand, right? And there, like you said, there's a beautiful blend between them. And the best part that I have seen right now is that science is catching up to a lot of the spirituality aspects of it, which means that now for those of us like you and I that want to see some proof that's more analytical in nature, we have that coming up.
There is proof already. All we need to do is look for it, and it is being collated and presented more and more. I mean, the proof is there. For the proof to become mainstream and overrun the existing paradigm, that hasn't happened yet, but I believe that it will. We will see it happen.
Oh yes. I mean, we're at the beginning of this transition where people understand that the way, let's say, we got indoctrinated in this culture of always chasing more, always wanting more, may not align with who we truly are as beings at the soul level, right? Before this avatar that we're in. And that's how I see it right now, right? I'm in this life right now. I chose this avatar for a very specific reason or reasons, and it's all about my growth and my elevation. And then if I can do that, then I can help others do the same.
It's a great analogy. Sometimes I think how there are these video games where you do get a character, an avatar, and you grow the character and you do stuff, etc. So it is a similar analogy. Looking at our life like that, it gives a great perspective. That I will say for sure.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny because I used to be an avid computer gamer, and that's what it really reminded me of. It's like I'm leveling up, right? I'm leveling up through lives, and that's what life is about: enjoying the beauty around you, but also seeing how you can bring more of your true self to light.
There is, I want to ask you, since we're talking about spirituality and science, I wanted to ask you in particular about technology and spirituality, which you are someone who is passionate to integrate them. So can you tell me, how do you mean that, and give me an example of how this works?
Yes, absolutely. I love the question, and it's something that a lot of people, including myself, had a bit of struggle with in the beginning, right? So I want to take us a step back for a second, right? If we look at quantum physics, or if we look at physics, really, everything that we know in the universe is made up of energy, right? Like, it doesn't matter if it's you or me, if it's the piece of grass I see in front of my window here, if it's the snow outside, if it's anything, everything is energy. Which, if everything is energy, right, that means that even technology that we interact with is also just energy in this beautiful world around us. So if you're attuned, if your frequency, if your vibration as a soul, as a human being is high enough where you can actually interact with all these energies the way you want to interact with them, then you can leverage something like technology as just an extension of yourself or an extension of the universe around you. So when I say the integration of technology and spirituality, is I leverage technology to help me, understand better, connect better, and overall be a better human being. And a great example is artificial intelligence these days, right? And a simple example of how you can connect technology to spirituality is you can leverage artificial intelligence to find out answers that, like you said, are not mainstream, but that are there, and that it helps you find that information. So that's just a very, very basic example. But then if you are, let's say, someone that's connected, someone that's at a higher frequency, and we talked before we jumped online about coincidences or synchronicities, well, you're going to start seeing things line up. I was talking to a dear friend of mine recently, and there's an AI bot, let's say, and it's a tarot card reader. Like, the tarot cards, and you're like, okay, that's, pretty out there, right? Like, even for me, I was like, okay, that's interesting. But then I saw people try to interact with it. And the ones that feel a bit more spiritually advanced, feel more connected, are getting the answers that, you go through 15 questions and it does 15 readings. And all of a sudden you're like, okay, all of those are fairly accurate. Now, is it 100%? Probably not. Is our mind getting in the way and maybe interpreting things differently? Probably. But there is something there that most of us don't realize. So what I'm trying to say is that me as a human being and as a soul, I have the possibility to change everything in my life about what's going on. It may not appear that I have the power, but all of us have the power to change our circumstances. And technology is just one tool that we have available to us to allow us to make those changes. Like, I'll give you another example really quick. Let's say you're someone that's stuck in your career. And these are people that usually come to me and I work with them. You're stuck in your career, okay? People usually say, you know what, I just have to go to work. I got to do my 8 hours, come home, enjoy some life. But what does life enjoyment look like? Netflix, computer games. And I'm talking because that was me as well, right? Maybe eating too much food, again, me. Lots of these things that are distractions because you're so burnt out, you're so unfulfilled at work that it seeps into your real life. By real life, I mean your personal life, and you forget about it, right? You can't do anything to really elevate yourself. But let's say you now become aware of these trends that are happening that you're doing. You have the internet at your fingertips to learn anything you want. There are courses you can take, free ones, right? Better than any university courses. There are things you can do to take yourself out of the situation you're in. Is it going to happen overnight? No. Is it going to happen tomorrow? Also no. But you take action, and it's going to happen sooner than you ever imagined.
If you enjoy this episode, can you find one person you think would find it useful and share it with them? I'd really appreciate it. It helps the show grow, and you'll also be adding value to people you care about. Thank you. And now let's get back to the episode. It is a journey indeed, and yes, and I don't want to digress too much and go in the direction of how we are programmed to expect things very fast, because that's our culture. But the personal transformation, even if it happens fast, in my experience, it's not something that will be maintained on its own. It is ongoing. So even if you manage to transform very fast, you will have to keep up with it. It's not something that will happen and then say, okay, now I'm transformed and go back to your old ways. It's a different level of, situations. And, it's great topics, and there is something, and I will switch gears now, Constantin, because there are some things that I really want to discuss about. And there is, in your work, I see that you discuss the 4 pillars, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. So I wanted to ask you, why is this holistic approach crucial for personal development? And how can one balance these 4 aspects?
I love the question, Agi. And I've come to realize that from my own experience, everything I talk about, everything I help people with is based 100% in what I've gone through myself and helped others go through as well. And what I've realized in my life is that I have a very successful professional career, I would say successful family life. However, I was still depressed. I was still anxious. I was still burnt out. I was still unfulfilled. And I started asking myself questions, why is that the case? And what I've come to realize is that I was putting my focus, and really most of my focus, on only one of those pillars you mentioned. And I'll explain that in a second. Mm-hmm. For me, it was all about the mental pillar, meaning that I need to get really good at my job. I need to get good at speaking, at interacting with customers and whatnot, and my colleagues at work. And that made me a very successful person in the professional life. But I ignored my physical side, right? When I was playing too many computer games and working, I was cutting back on sleep. I wasn't eating well. I wasn't exercising, right? That's the one aspect of it. Then the spiritual side is I wasn't necessarily connecting with, let's say, the universe, meaning even nature, like going on walks, or connecting to, let's say, a higher purpose, other than just go through life, go through the motions and expect that, I'll just be happy at the end of it, and that's my contribution. And then, of course, there's the emotional side of it. That was a big, big one for me. And of course, I'm still working on all of these. But the emotional side, think of it as not only how you interact with other people, so like my emotions towards you, Agi, or other people I interact with, but it's also about the world around us. So what are my emotions towards the world, or my thoughts around the world? And it's also about, and this is a big one that most of us don't pay enough attention to, and that's me included in the past, the thoughts we have about ourselves. Right? So, meaning, I used to always say things like, Constantin, you're so stupid, right? For ABSC, oh, you're such a procrastinator. Have self-doubt, have a fear of failure, fear of success, fear of rejection, hesitate, right? Procrastinate, have the imposter syndrome. These are things that will negatively impact you, meaning that it will keep you from achieving the goals you're going after. Because no matter how strong your mind is, let's say I have a strong mindset, I've learned from the best people. If my foundations, which is your emotional state, your psychology, are weak, self-sabotage will come in, something will happen, you'll get derailed right back to where you started, or sometimes even worse. And that's been my life, right? Again, I was successful in my career, successful in my personal life, but yet I couldn't lose weight. I couldn't stick to a routine for working out or walking my dogs. And I was like always wondering why. And then it brings us back to that holistic approach. What I've realized is that those 4 pillars, it's not that you have to dedicate 25% of your time to each of the 4, because there are always seasons in our life. But when you focus on one, don't ignore the others. The best analogy I use for those that have children, I don't, but let's say if you have children, you have 4 of them, right? Do you give your attention only to one of them? Or do you try to spread your attention a bit to every single one? No, of course. Maybe if one of your kids is in professional sports and you have to give them a bit more attention, sure, you're going to do that. But you're not going to ignore the other 3 children. Most people don't, at least, right? So that's kind of the same idea. Do you want to ignore parts of you? Because what's going to happen sooner or later, that part you ignored is going to essentially derail everything else you work towards.
I love that this explanation, the way that you said it. It makes complete sense. And, it made me realize that much of the traditional personal development is indeed about the mental aspect, how to improve either your knowledge or even techniques to become more motivated and so on. However, ignoring the other aspects, I think it is inevitably, if you have one pillar or two that are not working, inevitably they will affect the others that are working. We have to, and that's the whole, the holistic. There has to be balance between these four elements. And tell me in particular, because the mental, it's so very very much discussed, and also the physical. I would also say the same about the emotional. So, in terms of the spiritual element of the spiritual pillar in particular, can you offer some technique, something practical to be more able to integrate the spiritual element, the spiritual pillar into one's, journey, personal development, life, however you want to describe it?
I love the question, Aki. And there are quite a few practices I have implemented myself in my life and transformed who I am today. And some of it I share with the people I work with, as well as those in my life. So let's talk about a couple of these. The first one, the biggest one, I would say, not the biggest one, but one of the biggest ones, is this idea of practicing gratitude. Meaning that the way our society raises most of us, right, and the way, let's say, our caregivers and teachers and everyone else around us is showing us things to do, it's about always looking at what you have not really accomplished in a given day or in a given spot, and always having your eyes on the target. Nothing wrong with that, right? Because that's how you can get yourself to your destination. But if you're not enjoying the journey of the destination, and more importantly, if you're not celebrating the journey and being grateful for what you've experienced, when you do get to whatever end you have in mind, you're not likely going to find joy, fulfillment, happiness, abundance. None of that, because likely when you end up there, it's going to be different than what you had in mind. And because you were miserable along the way, because you never focused on the good stuff, it's not going to feel as good. So a practice of gratitude for me looks like this. In the mornings, as I do my meditations, I take a look and say, okay, what am I grateful for in this moment? And it could be the bed I'm laying on, or the couch, or the chair. It could be the air I'm breathing, the water I drank right before I sat down to do this, or anything that may have happened in the last 24 hours. And what it does, it essentially rewires your brain to look for positives. Because you see, from a psychology point of view, so if you look at the science side of it, our brain, our mind, our ego is there to protect us, which means that anything negative will always get to you a lot faster, like to where you're going to see it to your conscious mind. The positive things you're going to have to look for. But it's absolutely possible to retrain yourself, to remind yourself of what's positive in your life. So then if something negative happens in your life, you're not jumping automatically on this negative train of thought. You actually can, of course, you're going to be distressed with it, but then you're going to remember that there's always two sides to every coin. There's going to be a positive side and a negative side. And if you train yourself to be in the positive more often than not, then you're going to also default to the positive more often than not. And a practice of gratitude will allow you to essentially get into the mode of reminding yourself what's positive. It's not making stuff up. You're actually grateful for, the glass of water you have next to you, the food you have on the table or in the fridge, the roof over your head. It doesn't have to be this great thing that, you got a promotion at work or you achieved these things. Those are amazing, but those are rare in your life. So we have to celebrate and be grateful for the small things in life.
Most certainly. And what you said about enjoying and celebrating this, and the achievement will the achievement, that sense that I've achieved something, will very very quickly be succeeded by the next goal that will appear, and we run our life like this. And it really makes sense to not slow down necessarily in terms of how we want to progress with things, but slow down in terms of appreciating what we have achieved and what we are achieving. And I'm saying that, and I'm saying that to myself as well, because it is something that I'm working on, especially lately. It's something I find myself increasingly, working on it. And that's, my vulnerable share. And talking about vulnerable share, I noticed that in your work you talk a lot about vulnerability and authenticity also as well. So tell me, Constantine, about how your take on vulnerability and its importance.
Yes, I love the topic, Agi, and I appreciate first of all you being vulnerable there, because you're right. Like we need to be looking inwards a lot more and start trying some of these things, even though we're not going to be perfect at the beginning or ever really. We can start looking inwards and we can do more of this, which is what you shared as well. Now, when it comes to vulnerability and authenticity, what I've realized in my life is that I was really good at having this, let's call them multiple personalities, where I was someone at work, right? And I believed I couldn't be my true self, meaning be, the child at heart, the person that makes jokes, the person that's always jovial, the person that's always positive, because I had to have this strong persona at work where I was always this strong person, regardless of what was going on in my life or my mind. Then, of course, I had a different personality with certain groups of friends because, again, I was afraid of being left behind or being included in that group of friends. And then, of course, finally, let's say in my personal life, I could be my true self. But that's how often, like 10%, 15% of your life. So what might happen for most of us, we have these different personalities. And there might not be a huge difference between them, but it's going to make it incongruent with who you truly want to be. And that leads to sense of unfulfillment, dissatisfaction, lack of happiness, because you have to keep up this facade, you have to keep up this farce to be included, to be liked, to be seen. At least that's what our mind tells us. The reality is that what we're doing in those cases is we're trying to impress or connect with people that don't want to necessarily connect with us at the heart level, at the soul level, which means that we're just putting so much pressure on us for very little return. So when I look at vulnerability and authenticity, vulnerability means being true to who you are and sharing the good and sharing the bad as well. Meaning that if you're having a bad day, feel your emotions and then share them with others, because you may be able to help them overcome theirs. So in my journey, what I have found is that once I became truly vulnerable, so sharing my fight with depression, my journey so far, that's when people started to connect at a much deeper level, because it's almost like they're like, wow, he's talking about things that I want to talk about, but I can't. So it's almost like it's giving them permission to now look at it in their own life. And that's what vulnerability lets you do. It allows you to connect with another human being at a level that most of us do not get to connect on a regular basis. And that's when you start forming much stronger relationships and you have much better outcomes. So what I like to say is, let's stop trying to impress people that we don't even want to be around and start impressing ourselves first. And once you do that, everyone else around you is going to align with that. And if they're not aligning, they're going to live your life and someone else will come in that will align with you.
That's beautiful.
And authenticity ties into that, right? Because authenticity means be who you are, regardless if it's work, personal life, friends, acquaintances.
It's beautiful advice for sure. And, learning to accept, as you said, that the people that will not resonate with who you truly are, they will gravitate away and become, that is natural. And it might not be easy sometimes, but it is only natural. It's really a fascinating conversation, Constantin. And I do have... to start wrapping things up, I do have two last questions. I always last quick questions, my guests. Before I ask you, where do you want to direct a listener who has been intrigued by our conversation and wants to find out more about you?
Oh, thank you for that opportunity, Agi. I would say unleashthyself.com is where you can find my podcast and a bit more information. You can reach out to me directly if you want via email at constantine@unleashthyself.com. That's Constantine without the E. And then, of course, Constantin Morun on LinkedIn. Since I have a professional career, I like to interact on LinkedIn. Lots of people come to me that way. So feel free to send me a message either way. And if you want to listen to the podcast, YouTube is the best place. at Unleash Thyself or any of the major podcasting platforms. And like Agi said, I speak a lot about my personal transformation, my lessons learned. I have amazing guests on as well that speak about their transformation. It's all about inspiring you and empowering you on this journey.
Thank you. So, Constantin, what does personal development mean to you?
Yeah, I love the question. So personal development to me is essentially the ability for us to look at how we can take something that we don't necessarily agree about ourselves right now, or something we want to improve, and take it to the next level by looking inwards first versus outwards. And what I mean by that, and I'll explain really quick, is that I was always someone that read books, watched videos, listened to podcasts, listened to mentors and coaches, and kept looking outwards for answers. And while that allowed me to progress through my career and through my life and achieve certain things, it didn't truly unlock that personal development, mastery, like the name of your show. And I love what's in the background there, because that's really what this is about. It's about mastery. It's not about perfection. It's about mastery. So how can you get better at this? And it starts by looking inwards. So for me, personal development is this holistic approach to your growth that includes both the external and the internal looks.
Great. And hypothetically speaking, if you could go back in time and meet your 18-year-old self, what's one piece of advice you would give him?
Yes. I mean, I love the question. I used to be asking myself that a lot. And at the beginning, I always had these great answers to be like, I'll tell myself to buy Bitcoin, a lot more, do something like that. That's more physical in nature. Now I'm more leaning towards the idea of just observe and not say anything, just because the life that I've lived allowed me to be here today in front of you and speak with you, Agi. If I were to be able to go back in time and advise myself, who knows what path I would be on, and who knows if the advice I would give myself would even stick to an 18-year-old that, if I remember how I was back then, it would be like, yeah, probably think I was crazy, right? And might derail things even more. So I would say, no, nothing. I would just observe and be like marveling how naive and simple I was back then.
I have also thought, thank you, about whether this elaborate advice would stick to any 18-year-old self, but that's a different topic altogether. Constantine, I want to thank you very much for a truly delightful conversation, and I believe it was there was lots of value and inspiring actions also there that you shared. Before we conclude, what's one piece of advice or simple practice that our listeners can start implementing right now to put more into practice what you were discussing about the last half an hour?
Yeah. I'll say two things, because I do want to highlight something. So for those that are watching, I have a sign here next to my right side that says follow your heart. And that's where my life transformed, when I actually decided to stop listening to my head only and allow my heart to have a say. And what I mean by that is, like, I looked inwards and I found out what really brings me joy and fulfillment. And I'm doing more and more of that every single day. So I to take a step back and ask themselves, are we following our heart? Are we doing things from the heart as much as we're doing them from the mind? And then if you're not, find one thing you can do today or tomorrow together. And so that's the first part. The second part of that, I would say, when it comes to something you can do to bring yourself closer to yourself, and this is going to sound crazy, Agi, and it was for me when my mentor taught me this, but I have this simple practice now. I do it multiple times a day, but if you want to start with this, you do it one time when you wake up in the morning, you go to the washroom, because you have to go to the washroom anyway. Look in the mirror, look at yourself, take a deep breath in, put a big smile on your face, and then say 4 magical words. It's your name, and then the words, I love you. I know it sounds crazy, but this is what I do. I say, Constantine, I love you. And I have this big smile on my face. And what does that do from a psychological point of view, from a science point of view? You're starting your day with something positive. And I can guarantee you, when you put your smile on your face, even if it's fake at the beginning, let's call it fake, you're going to feel better. So if you start your day on the right foot, it's going to make everything else so much better. Compare that with something like you look out the window and you see it's raining, or you get out of bed and you hit your toe on the bed frame like I do sometimes. Compare those two scenarios and see how your day will change when you start with this simple yet transformational practice.
It's very powerful, very powerful. Thank you for sharing this, Constantin.
Absolutely.
I'm wishing you all the very best with your mission. It was such a joy to have you here with us today.
Such a joy to be here with you, Agi, and your audience. Thank you so much for having me on.
And before I close today's episode, I want to add two very important things. The first is an open invitation to you who are listening right now. I invite you to find me on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn and send me a direct message, and we can chat about anything you want. You can tell me who your favorite guest has been so far, or tell me who you'd like me to interview next, or anything else you'd like to discuss about the podcast and how it can serve you better. So that's an open invitation. Drop me a line and we will chat. The second thing I want to mention here is something that people often ask me about, and that is how to work with me. So, one of the main services I offer is one-to-one mentoring on mindset, personal development, confidence, and finding your voice. You can find more information about my services on my website, and please feel free to contact me for any further details. Until next time, stand out, don't fit in,